It was a bright Saturday afternoon, and the sun reflected off the polished windows of City Central Restaurant, a place famous for its expensive decor and strict, polite-only rules. Inside, the air was filled with the clatter of dishes, laughter of diners, and the occasional voice of a waiter rushing to fulfill an order. The manager, a stout man named Mr. Thompson, strutted through the dining area like he owned the world. He adjusted his tie, puffed out his chest, and gave a dismissive glance at anyone who didn't meet his standards. In his eyes, respect had to be earned through wealth and status, and everyone else was invisible. Then the doors opened. A man walked in, jeans, simple shirt, calm eyes, and a quiet confidence that somehow filled the room more than the chandeliers above. Heads turned, whispers began. Some diners thought he looked familiar. Waiters paused mid-step, but Mr. Thompson barely noticed. He was too busy pretending the restaurant's rules applied to everyone equally. "Excuse me, sir, but this restaurant, we don't serve you people here," the manager said, his voice dripping with arrogance. The man smiled. A small, unassuming smile, but there was a weight behind it, a quiet power that silenced the room instantly. That man was Muhammad Ali, arguably the greatest boxer of all time, undefeated, fearless, and a man whose name carried respect around the globe. Yet here, in this small moment, he faced rejection and prejudice. Ali didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even frown. He simply nodded, his eyes scanning the restaurant as if reading the people inside, the staff, the customers, the man who had dared insult him. There was patience in his posture, a calm that demanded attention without a single word. The contrast between the manager's arrogance and Ali's quiet composure was stark. In that instant, everyone present understood this wasn't just a man asking for a meal. This was a man whose dignity and power didn't depend on anyone's approval, a man whose every move could teach a lesson larger than words. And as Ali turned to leave, the tension in the room was palpable. Everyone waited, some in shock, others in curiosity. No one knew what would happen next. But one thing was clear. The events about to unfold would leave the restaurant and its manager forever changed. Even today, stories of that moment circulate online and in whispers, a reminder that true strength isn't always in the fists, but in the patience, calm, and confidence of a person who refuses to be humiliated. The day had started like any other at City Central Restaurant. Waiters rushed between tables, balancing silver trays loaded with steaming dishes. The scent of grilled meats and fresh bread filled the air, mingling with the faint perfume of diners who were clearly used to a life of privilege. At the center of it all was Mr. Thompson, the manager, who strutted through the restaurant like a king surveying his domain. His gold watch glinted under the lights, and his polished shoes clicked against the marble floor with an almost musical arrogance. He enjoyed this power. Every glance he gave, every word he spoke, was a reminder to the staff and customers alike that he was in control. A server dropped a glass by accident, and he barked, "Careful, we don't have time for clumsy mistakes." The room flinched at his voice, and even some of the regular patrons looked uncomfortable. To Mr. Thompson, respect was a currency, and he made sure no one could earn it without wealth or status. Then the doors opened. A man stepped in, not flashy, not loud, not commanding in the obvious sense. Jeans, a simple jacket, and a calm, unassuming face. No entourage, no security, no fancy car outside. Just a man walking in as if he belonged anywhere he chose. Heads turned instantly. Whispers rippled across the room. Is that? Could it be? But Mr. Thompson barely raised an eyebrow. He had seen plenty of people who thought they could enter this restaurant without meeting his standards. In his mind, this was just another person to reject. "Sir," he said with a smirk, standing tall behind the counter, "this restaurant isn't for everyone. We don't serve you people here." The man paused. A slight smile tugged at his lips, a smile that didn't show anger, didn't demand recognition, but somehow carried a weight that made the room grow quiet. That man was Muhammad Ali, the heavyweight champion, the legend, the man whose name echoed in arenas across the world. But here, in this moment, none of that mattered to Mr. Thompson. He was blinded by arrogance. Ali didn't argue. He didn't shout or demand respect. He simply pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, dabbed his hands lightly, and placed a calm, confident check on the counter. "I'd like a table for lunch," he said, his voice even, almost gentle, yet every word carried authority. The staff exchanged uneasy glances. A waiter hesitated mid-step. Customers leaned forward in their chairs, curious. Some whispered, "Is that really him?" Others just stared, unsure whether to intervene or wait to see how this would unfold. But Mr. Thompson wasn't listening. His focus was on his ego. "I don't care who you are," he snapped. "This place has rules. You either meet them or you leave." Ali nodded, calm as ever. "I understand," he said softly. "But sometimes the rules aren't as important as respect." The statement was subtle, almost like a whisper to the room, yet it echoed louder than any shout. For a moment, the restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Customers stopped eating. Waiters froze mid-step. Even some of Mr. Thompson's regular patrons felt a twinge of discomfort. Something about this man wasn't ordinary. Allie looked around, taking in the restaurant, the staff, and the manager himself. There was no aggression, no threat, only patience, dignity, and quiet confidence. And in that stillness, the first cracks in Mr. Thompson's arrogant composure began to show. Everyone in the room had a sense that this was more than just a rejected customer. Something bigger was unfolding, a story that would soon go far beyond this small dining room, a lesson in humility and respect that no one there would ever forget. And as Allie took a step back, the tension in the air was undeniable. The manager's smirk faltered for the first time, if only slightly. Ali's calm presence had already begun to shift the energy of the entire restaurant. The atmosphere in City Central Restaurant had shifted. What had once been the hum of casual chatter and clinking glasses now felt heavy with anticipation. Every eye was on the man in jeans and a simple jacket, the one who had dared to step into a world that openly rejected him. That man was Muhammad Ali, a legend whose presence alone commanded attention, even when he didn't raise his voice. Manager Thompson, however, had no idea who he was dealing with. He was confident that his wealth, his authority, and his strict rules were enough to intimidate anyone. He leaned forward, fingers drumming on the counter, a smirk plastered across his face. "Let's see what you've got," he said. "If it's some kind of joke check, don't waste my time." Ali calmly handed over the envelope. His fingers brushed the counter lightly, a gesture so polite it contrasted sharply with the arrogance of Thompson. The room seemed to hold its breath as the manager tore open the envelope. Inside was a check for $500,000, a small fortune, but in the manager's mind it didn't matter. He was convinced Ali was playing some kind of prank. He laughed, loudly and cruelly. "Nice try. You think fake checks impress me? Get out before I call security." The staff froze, some gasped audibly, others exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to intervene or remain silent. The customers, too, felt the tension, whispering among themselves, trying to make sense of the scene. Ali didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. But the calm in his expression was like a silent warning. Sometimes arrogance blinds the eyes that should see. He said softly, his voice steady but carrying a weight no one could ignore. But Thompson's ego would not allow him to hear reason. He scoffed, dropping the check into a trash bin near the counter. With a flick of his lighter, he set it ablaze. The smell of burning paper immediately filled the restaurant, sharp and acrid. The crackling flames were small, but the shockwaves they created were enormous. A hush fell over the room. Customers stopped mid-bite. Waiters froze mid-step, trays suspended in the air. Even some of the regular patrons who had been indifferent moments ago now stared wide-eyed, realizing the magnitude of the insult. One elderly server, who had been quietly observing, whispered to a colleague, "Wait, that face, I've seen him somewhere." The manager, oblivious to the truth, turned with a self-satisfied grin, expecting the staff to laugh at the cleverness of his action. But instead, the silence pressed down like a physical weight. No one laughed, no one moved. The room seemed to shrink around him, tension coiling in every corner. Ali, however, did not speak again. He did not yell, nor did he show anger. He simply nodded once, his eyes calm but piercing, and turned toward the exit. Every step he took was deliberate, measured, and confident. He left behind a room frozen in disbelief, the $500,000 check now ash and smoke, a symbol of the manager's arrogance. Some of the younger staff pulled out their phones, instinctively recording the scene.
"Who was that?"
One whispered, barely audible. The customers exchanged glances, murmuring softly. "That was Muhammad Ali." "Yes," another replied, "the greatest boxer of all time." Even outside the restaurant, word began to spread. A quiet hum of curiosity, disbelief, and admiration started circulating. Ali had walked in, faced blatant rejection, and handled it with calm power. His silence spoke louder than any lecture could. For Thompson, the manager, the realization had not yet come. But for everyone else, the lesson was crystal clear. Arrogance and disrespect can blind you, even to greatness standing right in front of you. In that moment, the restaurant was no longer just a place to eat. It had become a stage where humility and quiet strength had begun to rewrite the rules, where a legend had shown that true power isn't measured in words or gestures of authority, but in calm confidence and the patience to let actions speak for themselves. No one present would ever forget the scene. The fire, the silence, the calm figure walking toward the door. It was a conflict not resolved with anger, but with dignity, and the tension in the room promised that the story was far from over. As Muhammad Ali stepped toward the door, the restaurant remained in a tense silence. The usual buzz of conversation, laughter, and clattering cutlery had vanished completely, replaced by the weight of disbelief. Every pair of eyes followed him, some in awe, some in confusion, and a few in thinly veiled fear. The calm aura he carried was almost tangible, a force that seemed to bend the energy of the room around him. Mr. Thompson, the manager, was frozen behind the counter, staring at the remnants of the $500,000 check smoldering in the trash bin. His chest heaved, a mixture of indignation and pride battling with a creeping unease he didn't yet understand. For the first time in years, he felt powerless in front of a customer. He tried to regain control, clearing his throat loudly, attempting to bark out orders to the staff as if nothing had happened. "Move along, everyone," he said, forcing a laugh. Business as usual. But it was too late. The staff had already stopped obeying. A few younger servers exchanged uncertain glances, their hands hovering over trays they no longer knew how to carry. They whispered, half in fear, half in curiosity. "Did you see that?" That was Muhammad Ali. The Muhammad Ali. An elderly clerk near the back of the restaurant furrowed his brow, his memory straining. His eyes narrowed as he scanned Ali's calm face. "Wait, I've seen him before, yes, that's him. That's the champ." Murmurs spread like wildfire. Customers leaned forward in their chairs, straining to hear snippets of conversation. Phones came out as cameras started recording discreetly, the soft hum of digital devices filling the previously silent air. Ali's presence had transformed an ordinary lunch hour into an unforgettable event, and everyone instinctively knew that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Outside, a few passers-by noticed the crowd gathered at the windows, some pointing and whispering. Ali's name traveled faster than any social media post ever could. People began to speculate. Who was he? Why was he there? What had just happened? The story of a man rejected, humiliated, and yet calm began to take on a life of its own. Back inside, Mr. Thompson's facade of confidence was crumbling. He realized, slowly but painfully, that he had insulted a man far greater than anyone he had ever encountered in this restaurant. His arrogance, his reliance on rules and status, had blinded him to the reality of the moment. Sweat dotted his forehead as the first seeds of panic began to sprout. Ali, meanwhile, moved with grace and patience, unhurried, his steps deliberate. Each movement seemed to carry a message that was impossible to ignore. Respect is earned through character, not titles or rules. The calmness of his exit was in stark contrast to the chaos he had left behind, chaos not of violence, but of realization. Some customers tried to speak, calling out to him, but Ali didn't respond. He didn't need to. The energy in the room said it all. His silence, his dignity, and his quiet confidence were louder than any words could ever be. By the time he reached the door, the whispers had transformed into soft gasps of recognition and admiration. Even the younger staff, who had only seen Ali on television, were visibly shaken. They realized they had just witnessed a masterclass in patience, dignity, and strength, not in the ring, but in real life. As the door swung open, a hush fell over the room once again. Ali paused, looked back over his shoulder briefly, and offered a small, knowing smile, not of arrogance, but of awareness. He understood the lesson that had been delivered, and he understood the ripple it would create. Outside, the street was quiet for a moment, unaware that the legendary boxer had just walked into history inside those walls. Inside, the restaurant's air was thick with reflection, disbelief, and the first hints of respect for a man they had underestimated. In that instant, the staff and customers understood that this was not the end of the story. Something far bigger was coming. Something that would change not just the restaurant, but everyone in it. The silent lesson Muhammad Ali had delivered was just beginning to unfold, and the room braced itself for what was about to happen next, a revelation no one would ever forget. The restaurant seemed frozen in time. Every fork and knife hung in midair, every whispered conversation had stopped. Customers and staff alike were trying to process what had just happened. Muhammad Ali, the man they had just insulted, had walked out calmly, almost silently, leaving behind a trail of disbelief and tension. But the story was far from over. Outside the restaurant, the hum of city traffic continued, unaware of the storm that was about to hit inside. A sleek black car rolled to a stop in front of the entrance. Its windows reflected the sunlight like mirrors, hiding the figures inside. The car doors opened, and three sharply dressed executives stepped out, carrying briefcases and documents. Their presence immediately drew attention. Whispers spread through the street. Who are they? Why are they here? Inside, Mr. Thompson, the manager, was still trying to regain control, pacing nervously behind the counter. He cleared his throat, attempting to sound authoritative. Everyone back to work, but his voice lacked conviction. The staff exchanged worried glances, Something was about to happen, and they could feel it in their bones. The door opened again. Muhammad Ali stepped back in. His posture was the same calm, confident, unassuming presence as before. But this time he wasn't alone. Behind him, the executives carried stacks of documents, contracts, ownership papers, and official letters that would change everything. "Mr. Thompson," one of the executives said firmly. "We've been waiting for you, sir." The manager froze. His mind raced. He glanced at Ali, then back at the executives. Wait, Mr. Ali, that's him." His voice trembled. The arrogance that had fueled him moments ago was gone, replaced with a creeping panic he couldn't hide. Ali nodded slightly, his calm expression unchanged.
"Yes,"
he said softly.
"that's me."
His gaze swept over the room, landing on every staff member, every customer, every person who had witnessed the earlier incident. "I came here to make a deposit months ago, but now, I'm here to make a change." The realization hit like a thunderclap. The man they had insulted, dismissed, and humiliated was not just a customer. He was the new majority owner of the restaurant. The very walls that had echoed with his rejection now belonged to him. Gasps filled the air. Some customers whispered frantic apologies. Staff members exchanged stunned glances. Mr. Thompson's face turned pale as he struggled to comprehend the reality before him. All the power, all the rules, all the status he had clung to, meaningless. They had no weight against the quiet authority and influence of Muhammad Ali. Ali's voice broke the silence. Calm, steady, yet carrying an undeniable authority, he said, "Disrespect is easy. Respect is earned. I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. I came here to teach a lesson, that how you treat others will eventually come back to you." The room hung on his every word. Customers and staff alike felt the weight of the lesson. Even some of the wealthier patrons, who had thought themselves untouchable, lowered their eyes in reflection. Mr. Thompson fell to his knees, trembling. "Sir, I am so sorry. I didn't know who you were. I didn't know I—" Ali raised a hand gently, stopping him. "That's exactly the problem," he said. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. That is the lesson here." Then he turned to the old clerk, the one who had quietly treated him with politeness and dignity. "You've shown respect when it mattered most. From today, you're the new branch manager. Lead with fairness, humility, and integrity." The room erupted into murmurs of approval, some claps, and a few tears. Ali had not only revealed his ownership, but he had rewarded character and humility, while humbling arrogance in the most profound way. As Ali walked out, he left behind a scene that no one would ever forget. The staff, the customers, and even Mr. Thompson realized that this was more than just a restaurant story. It was a lesson in respect, in patience, in dignity, and in the silent power of a man who lets actions speak louder than words. The whispers grew outside the restaurant. Word would spread quickly. Social media would pick it up. By the end of the day, the story of Muhammad Ali and the restaurant that rejected him would inspire countless people around the world. And inside that small dining room, a single truth lingered in everyone's mind: humility, respect, and patience have a power no arrogance can ever match. The air in City Central restaurant was thick with disbelief. Customers leaned back in their chairs, unsure whether to clap, cheer, or simply sit in stunned silence. Staff members whispered to each other, glancing nervously at the manager, whose face had drained of color. For the first time, Mr. Thompson felt powerless, stripped of the authority he had so arrogantly wielded for years. Muhammad Ali didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand apologies. He didn't even appear triumphant. He simply stood there calm, collected, and dignified, a man whose presence alone carried a weight that no words could match. The executives behind him were busy organizing documents, confirming ownership, and quietly handling the legal formalities, but their actions were almost secondary. All eyes were on Ali. "Sir, I'm so sorry," Mr. Thompson stammered, sinking to his knees. His voice quivered as he tried to grasp the reality. "I didn't know who you were. I never intended disrespect." Ali looked down at him with quiet authority. "That's exactly the problem," he said. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. Respect is not given because of fame, money, or status. Respect is a reflection of who you are, not who the other person is." The manager's hands shook as he realized the gravity of his arrogance. All the rules he had clung to, all the condescension he had displayed, all the pride that had once seemed so unshakable, it had crumbled in an instant. He was no longer in control. In fact, he was the lesson, and Ali was the teacher. Meanwhile, the old clerk who had quietly treated Ali with courtesy all along stepped forward. He had remained polite, professional, and humble even in the face of the manager's arrogance. Ali turned to him, his eyes softening. "You have shown respect when it mattered most. That is why you deserve this," He handed him a set of documents, signaling a promotion, the new branch manager of City Central Restaurant. The room erupted into whispers of approval, some claps, and a few astonished gasps. Customers nodded in agreement, even some of the regular patrons, who had prided themselves on wealth and status, found themselves reflecting silently on their own behavior. Ali's next words carried the weight of a lifetime of lessons. Humility, patience, and dignity are more powerful than arrogance, rudeness, or fear. True leadership isn't about enforcing rules, it's about setting an example. The world doesn't remember those who look down on others. It remembers those who lift people up. Every staff member and customer in that restaurant felt the truth of his words resonate deep inside. Ali wasn't here to boast. He wasn't here to humiliate. He was here to teach a lesson in the most profound way possible through action, not words. The manager stayed on his knees, head bowed. "Sir, I will do better," he whispered. The words were genuine now, stripped of arrogance. He realized that his actions had consequences far greater than he had ever imagined. Ali's visit had not only changed the restaurant, it had changed him, possibly for the rest of his life. Ali nodded once and turned to leave. The executives followed, quietly managing the final paperwork. Outside, the hum of the city continued, unaware of the transformation that had just occurred within those walls. As Ali walked out, the staff and customers felt a strange mix of awe and inspiration. They had witnessed history in action, a moment that went beyond boxing or fame. It was about character, integrity, and respect, qualities that leave a lasting mark on the world. And in that quiet, subtle way that only true legends can manage, Muhammad Ali left behind a restaurant forever changed. The lesson was loud and clear: respect is earned through humility, kindness, and integrity, not through fear or status. No one would forget that day. Not the manager, not the staff, not the patrons. Every moment of humiliation, realization, and eventual transformation would be replayed in their minds for years to come. Ali's quiet exit left the restaurant in reflection, awe, and an unspoken promise to honor the lesson he had delivered so gracefully. City Central Restaurant would never be the same. The doors of City Central Restaurant closed behind Muhammad Ali, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. Inside, staff and customers alike sat in stunned silence, still absorbing the events that had just unfolded. What had begun as an ordinary lunch hour had transformed into a lesson none of them would ever forget. For Mr. Thompson, the manager, the experience was humbling in every sense. He had walked into that day believing his authority, his wealth, and his rules made him untouchable. But arrogance, as he had learned, can blind a person to reality. A man he thought he could dismiss casually had been far greater than any title or position could convey. The fire of humiliation that he had ignited with his lighter was nothing compared to the fire of awareness now burning inside him. The old clerk, the one who had quietly maintained respect and professionalism throughout, now stood in a position of leadership. Promoted to branch manager, he embodied the principle Ali had demonstrated. True character shines brightest in moments when it's not required to impress anyone. His calm demeanor and unwavering respect had not gone unnoticed, and now he held the reins to lead with integrity, setting a new standard for the restaurant. Ali's actions had spoken louder than any lecture, any reprimand, or any speech ever could. He hadn't shouted, he hadn't demanded recognition, and he hadn't humiliated anyone publicly. Instead, he had shown the power of quiet dignity, patience, and measured action. His lesson was simple yet profound: how you treat others defines you far more than what others think of you. Customers who had witnessed the events that day carried the story with them, sharing it with friends, family, and colleagues. Some were inspired to reconsider their own behavior, reflecting on times they had judged others unfairly or acted arrogantly. Staff members left the restaurant with a renewed sense of purpose, understanding that respect is not a courtesy granted to the wealthy or famous, but a fundamental human value. Even Mr. Thompson, humbled and shaken, began to understand the true cost of arrogance. In a single afternoon, his perception of power had been challenged, his understanding of leadership reshaped. He had seen firsthand that status and authority are meaningless without respect, and that true power often comes quietly, without announcement or fanfare. Muhammad Ali's exit was silent but monumental. The man who had been underestimated, dismissed, and even insulted had not only reclaimed his dignity, but had transformed an entire environment with a single act of decisive, principled action. It was a lesson in humility, strength, and foresight, the kind of lesson that echoes across time, long after the moment has passed. The moral was clear: respect isn't something you give only to those with fame, wealth, or power. It's something you show to everyone, at all times, especially when you think no one is watching. Because one day, the person you underestimate may hold the key to your own growth. your own opportunity, or even your own redemption. As the restaurant returned to its normal rhythm, the impact of that afternoon lingered. Staff walked with more mindfulness, customers with greater awareness, and even the building itself seemed to carry the weight of the lesson taught by a man whose calm confidence had rewritten the rules. For viewers watching this story unfold, the takeaway is powerful. True greatness isn't just measured in victories in the ring or accolades in the public eye. It's measured in patience, humility, and the ability to turn adversity into a lesson for others. Type respite in the comments if you believe humility is real strength. Share where you're watching from. Let's honor every kind soul who understands that dignity and character always matter. Muhammad Ali didn't just teach a lesson that day. He showed the world that respect and humility are the greatest victories of all.